On the surface, the Ned rig is the easiest bass fishing technique. You just put a worm on a jig head and you go fishing. But if we dig a little deeper, you will realize that there are many little tricks that will drastically increase the number of fish you catch. Today, we will dive into all those techniques by taking you through the gear you need, how to rig it, and how to fish it to ensure that you can catch more fish than anybody else on the Ned rig. But first, one of the biggest struggles I had as a self-taught fisherman is finding the right information to have success on my specific bodies of water. That is why I designed the Real Insight Fishing Program. This program is designed to help you save time and catch more fish as a weekend angler. By joining this program, you will get access to personalized coaching where you can ask me your specific questions and get answers catered to you. You will also get member-exclusive content only available in the program featuring monthly seminars, Q&As, and additional fishing tips, as well as a community forum to share tips and learn from other like-minded anglers. Lastly, you will even get access to exclusive tackle giveaways and even fishing trips with me. You can join today with a 14-day free trial by checking the link in the description of the video or the QR code right here and start catching more fish today. While there's no denying that the Ned rig just catches fish, you basically can rig this up however and go fishing and you will catch fish doing it. They just love it. I'm not sure why, but it is an excellent technique for catching a lot of fish. There are many little tricks I've learned over the years, so let's walk through what some of those are to actually help me and you catch more fish on this technique. And the first thing is, I find that a very good rod is important to fishing this technique. You want something that's going to allow you to not only get a good hook set, but feel what those fish are doing and what the bait is doing, because that's going to get you the most amount of bites. This is a very finesse technique. The bites are light and you have to work your bait very slowly. So you need something that's super sensitive to actually have good success with this. This rod right here is a brand new one that just came out, and if you would like to check any of them out, they will be in the link in the description below. This is the Cashin Element Z2. This is the Ned rig rod, but it comes in a variety of other models as well. And it is a super budget friendly rod at $129.99. This thing is amazing. It feels like it should be double what the price of this thing is. It's probably one of the best rods that I think Cashin has put out in a very long time, and I'm very excited to get to fishing with this thing this spring. The specs on this guy, and if you're looking at a different Ned rig rod that you want to use and have a quality rod, I want something in that 6'10" to 7'2" range, a medium power and a fast action. So you want something that's a little bit longer because these baits are generally pretty light. So a longer rod is going to allow you to get a better cast. And then the medium power is going to allow you to get a very good hook set on these fish and get them in the boat. You need something with a little bit of backbone, and we'll talk about why that's important in just a second when we get down to some of the terminal tackle here. And then the fast action, that's going to allow you to get that feel that we were talking about. Feel what your bait's doing down there on the bottom, feel if a fish has picked it up, and get that good hook set. So that's what I'm looking for in a good rod. A good reel is also important as well for landing fish. Once you get them up to the boat, you need something with a good drag. So again, I like the Shimano Sedona. I talk about it in all of my videos. It is an exceptional reel for 80 bucks. And if you pair it with this rod right here, all in, you're looking about $200 to get a super quality setup to fish with. This thing has one of the smoothest drags out there at that $80 price point, and it performs flawlessly. I've landed numerous big smallmouth with this, and they pull very hard once they get up next to the boat. So very impressed with their drag on that reel there. And then from there, your line, I love the braided line, especially in that lime green color. It allows me to see my bait on the bottom, and I want my Ned rig on the bottom. The more your Ned rig leaves the bottom, the less fish you're going to catch right off the bat. So I want to know what my bait is doing at all times, and I can do that by using that lime green braid. I can see if my line is laid slack on the bottom and make sure my bait's down there. And it's super sensitive because it has no stretch. So as I'm dragging my bait along the bottom, a sensitive rod and some braid, you'll be able to make sure that your bait is staying down there on the bottom. And then going back to that long cast, I spool this up with 10-pound braid. I have the Suffix Revolve on here. I'm gonna be trying that for the spring this year, but Suffix 832 will work just as well. 10-pound test, you can get a very far cast with that. It's like 4-pound test diameter. And then to make sure that those fish don't see your line, I tie an FG knot to some fluorocarbon leader. I almost exclusively use 8-pound test fluorocarbon leader when I'm fishing a Ned rig. I find it gives me just enough abrasion resistance as you're dragging that bait in the bottom at all times. 6 tends to be a little too light and gets worn out too fast, and 10 might cut back on the number of bites you get just a little bit. So that 8 seems to be the sweet spot. You get the most amount of bites and the most amount of abrasion resistance. If you put 10 or 15 feet of fluorocarbon on there, those fish will never see this braid coming. Most of the time, it'll be way far away from them where they're actually looking at the bait, but it allows you to get the benefit to see what your bait's doing down there on the bottom. Now let's talk about terminal tackle when it comes down to your Ned rig. Basically, the only terminal tackle you need is a Ned rig jig head. But one of the biggest changes I made with my Ned rig fishing was not using the TRD heads that Z-Man makes. While they're great to get started, that is what I used when I first started learning this technique, I found that the hook is actually too small. They use a very, very small hook in there. So when those fish would eat that bait, they wouldn't get the hook in their jawbone, they'd just get lightly skin hooked, and most of the time they would come off. Or that hook is so light wire that you would get bent hooks on fish, not even big ones. I could bend them out on 2-pounders or fish like that. And a lot of times I need to pull these fish away from rock piles and logs that I'm catching them in down on the bottom. So if you put just a little bit of heat on them, you'd bend the hook out and lose the fish anyway. So I wanted to find a way to get more fish in the boat. A lot of times Ned rig fishing comes down to landing more as opposed to getting more bites. It already gets a ton of bites, and if you're fishing it, it's because the fishing's tough. That's when you want to make sure you can land every bite that you get. And I started pouring my own Ned rig jig head. So Do It Molds has a jig head mold called the Midwest Finesse mold, and that's the one I started using, and I found that the owner hook fit in there, and this is a 1/0 size. It's, I think, 3 sizes bigger than the one that they put in the TRD heads that you can buy in store. And it also saves you a ton of money. You break these off constantly when you're fishing in a lot of heavy rocks and wood down on the bottom. So pouring them yourself so you can save a lot of money and customize them to have the correct hook in there. So these things will not bend out and they're laser sharp. So if I'm hooking a fish, my catch rate went way up once I started using these hooks. Now, if you don't have the mold or the capabilities to pour these yourself, the good news is that Owner actually started making these. They're called the Owner Blockhead. Again, all the products will be linked down below, so if you want to check them out, you can do that. That blockhead has the same hook that I pour in these ones, the 1/0 Owner hook, and that has various sizes to choose from. So you can find other Ned rig heads on the market that already come with that larger, more stiff hook. Now that people have realized you need that little bit more stout hook to land more fish. Now the other thing with your jig heads that you want to pay attention to is the size of jig head. This is probably more important than anything else with your Ned rig fishing. It makes a huge difference how big of a head size you are using. I used to just go and buy one head size and I would just fish that one, and if they were eating the Ned rig, I'd catch them. If they weren't, I wouldn't. But what I found is sometimes these fish want it flowing down, especially in rivers, at a certain speed to get more bites. So I started pouring with that Midwest Finesse mold. They have everything from a 1/16 up to a quarter in all the little increments in between. There's like 6 different sizes. I pour all of them, and the smallest little weight change dependent upon the current of the day can make a big difference. I can go from fishing a 1/8 ounce to a 5/32, and it will make a difference most of the time throughout the day. So I started switching between all these weight sizes. My biggest rule of thumb is use the lightest weight size that you can get away with and still maintain bottom contact. If you are throwing your bait out there and every time it is getting hung on the bottom, your weight is too heavy. You're getting way down in the actual rock and not drifting it over the rock to get results. So if you're getting snagged a ton, lighten your weight size up. If you're throwing it out there and you have a lot of current or a lot of wind and you're constantly like, I can't feel the bottom, you have too light of a weight size, so go up a little bit and do it in small increments. So like if you're throwing a 1/4 ounce and you're getting snagged every time, cut that off and throw a 3/16 on. That could make enough of a difference. It might not, and then you could cut that off and go down again, but that small little weight change will make a difference until you find that sweet spot of the weight that those fish want for the given day. Now, as for baits, there's really only 2 that I like to use. There is one super important thing that you need to pay attention to with your your baits. They cannot have salt or minimal salt in the bait at all. If you have too much salt in this, it will cause it to fall over on the bottom instead of stand up like a Ned rig should. So the Busa Neds, they do not come with salt in them, and they will stand up and quiver on the bottom a little bit. So I have started using these and have had a little bit of success with them, but the one that's a tried and true for me is obviously the Z-Man TRD. This thing with the Elastec material will float straight upright on the bottom and perform flawlessly on a Ned rig head. I fish basically 3 colors. I use the green pumpkin. Pretty much anything natural will work. You don't have to get too specific with it. If they have green pumpkin with purple glitter or green pumpkin with red glitter or whatever, it will work, but some type of a green pumpkin or a green pumpkin with a glitter. And then I've been using this Tackle Warehouse exclusive color. This one's called Game Changer. The Ned rig is designed to mimic pretty much anything on the bottom. So it can do bugs, worms, bait fish, all kinds of stuff. And this Game Changer color up here in the Northeast mimics emerald shiners and small perch and bluegill fry exceptionally well. So this little color in clear water, smallmouth bass, stuff like that up north works crazy good. So I've been using that one a lot. And then the one thing I would recommend not doing is what I used to do when I started. I would get the 3-inch Gary Yamamoto Senkos. I always loved the Gary Yamamoto Senkos and figured if I put a 3-inch on a Ned rig head, it would work well. Not only do these rip very easily once you put them on that bait keeper, but they're full of salt. So when you get them on the bottom, they actually just fall over and they don't perform like a Ned rig should. So not every 3-inch stickworm that's out there on the market will work the same on this. Make sure it doesn't have salt or it's made out of Elastec material. You will have the best success by doing that. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about the retrieve with this bait. There's basically 2 retrieves that I do dependent upon the mood of the fish. If your fish are very lethargic and do not want to bite whatsoever or are very pressured, I throw this thing out there, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and I will slowly drag this thing back. I basically will take my hand off the reel, pull the bait towards me, and then pick up my slack as I stop pulling, and then pull it again, and make sure that thing is just crawling along the bottom the entire time. When they are very pressured and very tough to bite, if that thing leaves the bottom at all, a lot of times that will cost you fish right there. Now, if you have some more active fish that are a little more willing to bite, you can throw this thing out there and do small little hops along the bottom, and it will kind of hop over the rocks and stuff, and then when it stops, it will stand upright on the bottom. So I do a little bit of both. I usually start with the hopping retrieve to see if they're willing to bite it, because I can cover just a little bit more water fishing a little quicker like that. And then if I know they're not gonna bite, or I know there's fish right in front of me and I need to get them to bite, I will slow down and physically drag that thing so slow on the bottom to get the most amount of bites. And while these tips will help you improve your Ned rig fishing, if you want to learn a bunch of tips to help you improve your wacky rig fishing, check this video out right here, hit that subscribe button down below, and we'll see you on the next one.